You know, you're not required to run a version of your life story that exhausts you, that bores you, that feels like struggle. I know you know this. And if you have arrived on this particular message, you are remembering it at an entirely new level. You are remembering it beyond concept, beyond the mind, and at a visceral level of living what that actually means. Part of that is reflected through the knowing that you simply won't do things that are outside of your resonance, that are outside of your values, that go against with what matters to you. Perhaps in some cases, this has resulted in a bit of a collapse or a withdrawal, or maybe in other cases, this has been sort of a peaceful pausing, a observation, a reflecting. Whatever state or states that you find yourself in, this particular message shows up because you're calling in your current level of empowered embodiment in this reality. And I'm here for it. I'm Danielle Lynn, by the way, your synchronistic fellow traveler, co-creator in this reality, and one who is very alive with each and every one of us, remembering just how empowered we are when we operate from our coherent heart, gut, mind, and beyond system and live in this reality as who we truly are. So one of the first reflections I'll bring forward is this idea of needing to be something, anything more than what you are and who you are. It's a concept that can be subtly rooted in this idea of not enoughness now. And it can be incredibly subtle, right? We can feel a certain level of enjoyment where we are while still chasing a version or an idea of ourselves or a situation that we project into the future that we on some level imagine will be superior to the present moment. And this is the way a lot of people have found it normal to operate in this reality, right? It's one of the ways people sometimes construct their goals. And there's nothing inherently wrong about choosing a pathway of shifting that delights you. The challenge itself comes when an aspect of you projects the idea that it will be better onto this perceived future reality. Because what happens to the you that is now is there is a subtle level of dissatisfaction that comes into play. There's also a subtle energy of chasing or striving that can come forward. Now, there is a middle way. There is a fine line. There is a way to challenge oneself without necessarily triggering the dissatisfaction factor in the present moment. And one of the ways to do that is to deeply embrace the experience of tension. So to actually love the feeling of being in between transition, to love that dynamic of being on the journey of transforming. But what that does is it actually transmutes you from projecting the better tomorrow onto the future and rather deeply enjoying the now on the unveiling to whenever the new now becomes the future. And this might seem like a subtle distinction, but I will reflect to you right here, that the energetic quality of how you approach yourself in the present moment, the way you think about it, the way you describe it, the way you meet it and wake up to it, that is your whole reality. I really want to invite you to perceive what was just said. The way you meet the moment is the shape and the configuration of your whole reality. And it is why when people buy into this fantasy of when I have enough money, when I have enough time, when this happens, when that happens, da da da, the reason why that often keeps people in a loop, in an energetic loop, a mental loop, etc., is because right now they're buying into a dynamic that a future point will resolve the present moment. And so that's what's being created in the moment. The thing I would reflect about that, I mean, this is just very easy to unveil, because think of times, right? I've done this in my own life, right? I've done this in my own life. Think of times when you believed a future situation, circumstance, whatever, would resolve a tension for you. Okay. This is why you find people who say something like, once I make this much a year, I'll finally feel like it's enough. And they'll sometimes find that when they make that amount, whatever that amount is, they may find themselves not feeling like it's enough. They may find themselves continuing to think, well, now I need to earn more so I can have enough savings. So if something does happen, then I can still keep this position, this lifestyle that I'm enjoying so much, right? And this is one of the great secrets of this reality, is that the energy with which you are continually engaging with it is shaping the dynamic of not only your relationship to it, but the possible people, opportunities, and situations you can connect with. Which brings us to the next point. Don't mind what you are seeing right now if you don't like it. And what I mean by that is, when you look at a situation around in your life and you don't like it, one of the last things that I would invite you to do is make stories about it, right? One of the reasons why I don't find complaining specifically effective is because it's essentially a drama story about a situation that a person says they don't prefer. But what happens when we perpetually complain and tell this story is we actually reinforce it in our experience of reality. One of the things that I'm deliberate about in my experience of reality is I will be authentic about preferring or not preferring something, but I will treat it very neutrally. If you ever heard of the term gray rocking, I gray rock experiences that I don't prefer to repeat. I neither give them positive nor negative energy. They get a gray rock kind of energy. I am aware of them. I don't bypass them. I don't ignore them, but I only give it just the amount of energy and presence needed to take the next resonant step. And what happens as a result is I have more energy to focus on where my power is. And I want to be clear, this actually isn't optimistic thinking. This is something closer to energy effective thinking. This is something closer to resiliency in the face of a continuously changing universe and world. You can have all kinds of contingencies that you want for a certain plan, and if you transform your relationship to change and the unknown, then you have the ultimate vehicle in your back pocket. Because, again, the only consistent really, really, really is change in this place. And so on the other side of the equation, let's talk a little bit about the positive stories, because there's things that happen that we celebrate and we enjoy. So on the other side of the equation, let's talk about the positive stories, okay? Because we can also find ourselves enjoying things, but then immediately feeling concerned about those things vanishing. And what I would point out to you is that only occurs when you've created a dynamic in your life of waiting for specific moments before you give yourself permission to feel whole or happy or complete or content. Something that I would reflect is that a lot of people gauge their enjoyment on life through the filter of things going their way. But the challenge with gauging your life that way is a lot of times our way is being filtered through an egoic, a mind ego-based perception of how we imagine we would want reality to be. And if and when reality doesn't turn out that way, then that creates what they call disappointment. I like that I threw that out. What they call disappointment. I wonder who they are. But when you adapt a more playful, a more playful relationship with your reality that can have some kind of guidelines or outline, right? You can say, yeah, I imagine I'd prefer this, this, or this. And if it starts to turn out differently than you imagined, instead of immediately trying to press the brakes, cross your arms, get upset, you just start going, interesting, interesting. One of the things to remember in this reality is the way you do something is the ingredient that you're infusing in the creation. So if there's something you want to create and you find yourself moving in a fear-based, a force-based way, there may be a part of you that believes that you need to move in a way that is ultimately out of alignment for yourself in order to create something. I say that from experience. There are many times in building businesses or doing things in the past where I believed I needed to force my way through certain situations. And it was hard to argue with the results because there were many times that then I would say, well, because I did that, this was successful, or this made this money. But what I wasn't taking into account at that time was I was doing so at the expense of my own vitality. You ever hear of burnout? Boy, I sure did. And one of the things that I discovered was when I am throttling my life, when I'm making choices that are supremely against my own energy, I may be able to, let's say, create an outcome that I set my mind towards. But I found that every single time I instead take some moments to actually pause, to go within to my core, to choose to move from discernment and not stress, not struggle, not fear, but choose from my most clear inner place, the results are more sustainable, are more loving, not only to me, but more involved. In fact, it's what I currently experiment with in my own organization. This is not stuff that I simply tell or reflect to you and then do something else. This is what I am putting forward in the infusion of how I create and co-create. And part of my inspiration for sharing these messages and reflections is so that fabulous, creative, inspired beings such as yourself can see what is alive in you and what you want to embody and teach all of us in the world. Because one of the most effective ways that we learn and we transform together is through the actual embodied experiences. When I wanted to see different structures in this world for business, for education, for even the way resource can be flowed, I started to ask for myself, well, where can I begin? And this is part of what I experiment with across my, I want to use the word pantheon, across my pantheon of offerings and portals and whatnot. And so now I bring this reflection to you because this isn't about, a virtue or a moral. This is about how you get to be the most effective, the most enjoyable version of yourself in this world and in this reality. Because you're no longer trying to force a story of yourself through, because you're no longer buying into the idea that you must burn yourself into the ground to save this world or anyone else. And instead, I imagine you doing what might seem to some as the hardest thing in this reality, which is to say no to any of the stories or situations that have had momentum or a hold in your life, that you are just at a true soul, visceral level, complete with, so that the true essence of you has enough breathing room and space to step forward and show you what you got. And boy, I got chills just feeling, whoever y'all are, what you got. I'm going to cap off today's reflection with a passage here from Transurfing. I feel like it's relevant. I get the feeling this particular passage may assist you in understanding something that's going on in your life right now. It's very interesting. So in my particular book, it's on page 173. So it says here, a projection is when a person's dissatisfaction with self has been forced into the subconscious and pours out onto others. No one wants to criticize themselves for their own seemingly unacceptable attributes, so they might ascribe it to other people instead. So people are often very quick to criticize others for the very things that they dislike in themselves. And you may have done it yourself without being aware that you're doing it. Of course, it doesn't necessarily mean that whenever a person blames someone for something negative, they necessarily embody the same qualities themselves, but it can often be the case. So, if someone is unfairly accusing you of something or accusing you of being something you are not, ask yourself whether that person embodies the same trait themselves. It is probable that they do, because if you are genuinely not resonating with what you are being accused of, then it is possible that the other person has a projection in their own head and they are putting it onto you. So, I invite you to integrate what we've shared today. I have some experiences upcoming here in the lab. You might want to check that out if you feel inspired. If you're also interested in working with me, I will put out portals every now and then. The most recent portal has just filled. However, you can apply for the upcoming wait list. I would love to see you there. And in all cases, my friend, I deeply look forward to our next conversation.